Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked back at a decision you made maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10, and thought, what was I thinking? Not with anger, not with regret exactly. Just with this quiet, peaceful realization that you were a completely different person back then. You didn't know what you didn't know. That feeling, that gap between who you were and who you are now, that's where wisdom lives. Not in books, not in quotes on Instagram, not in anything anyone ever told you. Wisdom lives in the distance between your old self and your current one. We'll walk through that distance together. Because wisdom isn't a destination, it's a direction. The moment you think you've arrived, you've already started going backwards. There's a story about a young scholar, let's call him Tariq. Tariq was brilliant, and he knew it. By 24, he had read more books than most people own. He spoke 4 languages. He could argue any side of any debate and walk away feeling like he'd won. People admired him, but not many people liked him. There was always something slightly cold about Tariq. Something that made you feel he was only half listening, preparing his response while your words were still in the air. One day, Tariq traveled to visit a famous elder in a small mountain village. He had heard this man was extraordinarily wise, and Tariq respected wisdom, or what he thought wisdom was. He arrived at the elder's home, sat down across from him, and immediately began talking. He shared his theories about philosophy, human nature, the way the world worked. He talked for nearly an hour without stopping. The old man sat quietly. He made tea. He poured 2 cups and he listened. When Tariq finally finished, he leaned forward and said, "So, what do you think? Am I right?" The elder looked at him gently and said, "Your cup is already full. How can I pour anything into it?" Tariq frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," the old man said, "that you did not come here to learn. You came to be confirmed." Tariq was silent for the first time in years. He drove home that night deeply unsettled. Not because the old man had insulted him, but because somewhere deep down, he knew it was true. He had spent his entire life filling his cup, adding more, piling on, but he had never once thought to empty it. And here is what Tariq slowly came to understand over the years that followed. Wisdom doesn't begin with adding. It begins with emptying. It begins with the radical, uncomfortable act of sitting with what you don't know and being at peace with it. We live in a world that worships certainty. Have an opinion, pick a side, know where you stand, be confident, be decisive, appear strong. And there is nothing wrong with confidence. Done right, it's a beautiful thing. But confidence without humility is just arrogance wearing a nice coat. The wisest people in history, whose words we're still repeating, all shared one quality most people overlook. They were comfortable saying, "I don't know." Socrates built his entire legacy on that statement. He walked the streets of Athens asking questions. When people gave him answers, he asked more questions. Not to embarrass them, not to win, but because he genuinely believed the beginning of wisdom was recognizing the limits of your own understanding. He once said the only thing he knew for certain was that he knew nothing. People thought he was being modest. He wasn't. He was being precise. Because the moment you believe you have figured something out completely, you stop growing. You stop listening. You stop seeing what's right in front of you. The empty cup isn't a sign of ignorance. It's an invitation. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Nadia. Nadia was 43 years old when her life fell apart. Her marriage ended. Her business, something she had built over 12 years from nothing, collapsed 6 months later. And her mother, the one person she had always been able to call, passed away in the winter of that same year. 3 losses, 1 year, back to back. People around her expected her to fall. Some quietly, secretly, waited for it. Because there is something in human nature that wants to see the strong person crack. Not out of cruelty, but out of reassurance. It makes us feel less alone in our own fragility. But Nadia didn't crack. She went quiet instead. She stopped going to events. She stopped performing strength. She stopped explaining herself to people who hadn't earned the right to understand her. She started waking up early, before the noise of the world began, and she would sit on her small balcony. with a cup of coffee and just be. No phone, no plans, no productivity. Just the sound of the city slowly waking up, and her own breath, and the strange, uncomfortable gift of stillness. It was in those mornings that something began to shift. She started to notice things she had never noticed before. The way light moved across her kitchen floor, the expression on a stranger's face on the bus, the way a small act of kindness could make her eyes fill with tears for no reason she could name. She was cracking, but not the way people expected. She was cracking open. And through those cracks, slowly, quietly, stubbornly, wisdom began to grow. 2 years later, Nadia started a small group for people going through loss. She didn't advertise it. She just opened her home once a week, made tea and listened. People would come in broken, and they would leave feeling, somehow, less alone. A woman once asked her, "How do you always know the right thing to say?" Nadia laughed softly. "I don't say very much," she said. "I just stopped being afraid of the silence." Here is something that took most of us too long to learn. Pain is not the enemy of wisdom. Pain is often the beginning of it. Not because suffering is good, not because you need to be broken to be wise. That's a dangerous and false idea. But because pain, when we stop running from it, has a way of stripping everything unnecessary away. It removes the performance. It removes the pretending. It removes the version of yourself you built to impress other people. And underneath all of that, underneath the career, the image, the opinions, the carefully curated personality, there is something quieter, something more honest, something that has been waiting patiently for you to pay attention. That quieter thing is you, the real you, the one that doesn't need to be anything for anyone. Wisdom doesn't come from having an easy life. It comes from having a real one. There was a father who wanted more than anything to prepare his son for the world. He was a practical man. He taught his son to work hard, to save money, to be honest in business, to keep his word. Good lessons, important lessons. But as his son grew older, the father noticed something troubling. His son was afraid. Not of any one thing, just afraid in a general and quiet way of everything uncertain. Every decision felt like a cliff edge. Every change felt like a threat. One summer, the father took his son on a journey to a river he had known since childhood. The river was wide and fast and cold, and the father waded in, up to his waist, letting the current push against him. "Come in," he called to his son. The boy hesitated on the bank. "It looks dangerous." "It is," the father said. "Come in anyway." Slowly the son waded in. The current was stronger than he expected. He grabbed his father's arm. "Don't grab me," the father said. "Find your own footing." The son panicked for a moment. Then slowly he stopped fighting the current. He adjusted. He found 2 flat rocks beneath his feet. He steadied himself. He stood there, shaking slightly but standing, and he looked at his father with wide eyes. "There," the father said, "you just learned the most important thing I can teach you." "What?" the son asked. "How to stand in a river?" "No," the father said, "how to stop fighting what you cannot control and find your ground anyway." They stood together in that river for a long time, not talking, just feeling the water move around them and through them and past them. The son never forgot it. 30 years later, when life brought him his own rivers, he always heard his father's voice. "Stop fighting what you cannot control. Find your ground." This is one of the oldest lessons in wisdom literature. Across every culture, every tradition, every century, the Stoics called it the dichotomy of control. The Buddhists called it non-attachment. The Sufis called it surrender to what is. Different words, same truth. There are things in this life you can influence, and there are things you simply cannot. The weather, other people's choices, the past, how long you live, whether someone loves you back. And the single most exhausting thing a human being can do is spending your life trying to control what cannot be controlled. Wise people don't do this. Not because they don't care, they often care deeply, but they have learned where their power ends and where acceptance must begin. And here is the strange, counterintuitive truth about acceptance. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. When you stop fighting the river, you can finally feel which way it's flowing and move with it instead of against it. I want to end with one more story. An old woman, a grandmother, was sitting with her grandchildren on the last evening of summer. The children were restless. School was starting tomorrow. The long golden days were over. One of the grandchildren, a girl of about 10, climbed into the old woman's lap and asked, "Grandma, how do you know so much?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the evening sky. Then she said, "I don't know very much, my love." "But you always know what to do," the girl said. "No," the grandmother said gently. "I just know how to wait until I do." The girl thought about this. "Is that wisdom?" she asked. The old woman smiled. "That's the beginning of it. What's the rest?" The grandmother looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Loving people even when it's hard. Telling the truth even when it's easier not to. Knowing when to hold on and when to let go. And never ever believing that you have finished learning." The girl nodded slowly. "That sounds hard." "It is," the grandmother said. "That's why so few people do it. Wisdom is not a prize you win at the end. It is not a certificate. It is not a status. It is not something that arrives one morning and stays forever. It is a practice. A daily, imperfect, deeply human practice. It looks like pausing before you react. It looks like listening, really listening, to someone whose life is nothing like yours. It looks like admitting you were wrong, without turning it into a performance of humility. It looks like sitting in uncertainty, without reaching for false comfort. It looks like choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. It looks like the river, the cup, the silence, the cracks that let the light in. None of us are wise all the time, not even close. We lose our patience. We say the wrong thing. We hold on too long or let go too soon. We pretend to know things we don't. We avoid the questions that scare us most. But every now and then, in a quiet moment, in the space between one breath and the next, something settles. And we see clearly. And we choose well, and in that moment, however brief, we are exactly who we were always meant to become. Keep going, keep emptying the cup, keep wading into the river. The wisdom you're looking for isn't far away. It's already inside you, waiting for the noise to stop so it can finally speak. Stories in wise ink, because every life holds a lesson worth telling.